What's up, Joe? What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Sports 360. I'm your host, Jeff Fannell. Today we'll be talking baseball with Jeff Frye. Jeff possesses an interesting blend of perspectives. He played in the big leagues for 10 years. He's a veteran sports agent who has represented scores of major league players. And recently, he joined the broadcasting ranks, working pre- and post-games for the Texas Rangers on Fox Sports Southwest. Jeff's take on the game is fascinating. I think you'll enjoy what he has to say. So I invite you to settle in for our conversation with Jeff Frye on Sports 360. And welcome to the show today, former Major League player Jeff Frye. Jeff played in the major leagues from 1992 to 2001. These days, Jeff is a sports agent. He represents several major league players. And most recently, he has started doing broadcast work on the Fox Sports Southwest network for the Texas Rangers. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Jeff.
I'm glad to have you on. I'm really glad to have you on. I was thinking about this earlier today. I know many former players. I know probably more sports agents, and I also know my share of broadcasters. But I wanted to have you on the show because you sort of give me three in one. I can do a little, I can do a little bit of one-stop shopping with you and getting the perspectives on the game of baseball from as a former player, as an agent, and now as a broadcaster. So I wanted to have you on and get those different perspectives from you in one sitting. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to come on the show today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Jeff. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none.
I often think about the game as I'm watching it from a fan perspective. And one of the things I try to do all the time, and we're going to talk about your career and touch on as many things as we can in the time that we have, but one of the things that is important for me because it just teaches me so much when I talk to former players is talking to them about today's game and when they played. I mean, your last game was in 2001. Not trying to date you, Jeff. It just is what it is, right?
It is what it is.
But your last game was in 2001. And so, you played at a time where it was a bit different. The game was different then than it is now. And I see it from a fan's perspective, but from a player's perspective, someone who played in the big leagues as long as you did, how do you see the game today compared to when you played? What are some of the major differences? And, talk about the good and the bad, but what are some of the major differences as you see it?
Well, I'll start with the good. To me, there's more talented baseball players now than ever. These guys you look at the pitchers, everybody seems like they throw 95 to 100 miles an hour. Not necessarily pitchers, but they have a great velocity, and you see all these, especially this year, all these young players coming out of nowhere that are just amazing young players. I remember when I came up, it was, you just tried to stay in the big leagues, and you expect a rookie to make an impact. Like some of these rookies are coming up and making immediate impact. And you just didn't see that back when I played. And, this Albies kid, some of these young pitchers, the pitcher for the Brewers who's striking out two guys every inning, Hader, I think his name is.
Right.
It's just a lot different as far, that aspect. As far as the game has definitely changed. It's more of the home runs and the strikeouts, and I'm not a fan of that. I was a smaller guy. I still am a smaller guy, but I learned to Um, hit line drives and ground balls, and occasionally maybe run into a home run. But now it just seems like the strikeout is accepted. And when I came up, it was not accepted. I was like, I told you before, I was embarrassed when I struck out. I
Yeah.
felt like that was the biggest failure that I could have. And I did everything in my power not to strike out. I choked up. Um, I would do anything to just put the ball in play because that was my role. My role was to get on base, to move runners, and definitely not strike out or hit the ball in the air. I got yelled at when I hit the ball in the air.
Really?
Yes, it was. Yeah, if I went up there and hit a pop up in the infield, I knew that I messed up. I
Jeff,
was
that's interesting, Jeff. And I'm sorry to cut you off there, but that's interesting, right? Because as I watched the game today, it seems as if the upward swing, the uppercut swing is in vogue. It seems everyone's trying to hit the ball in the air, because I think there's some belief among the sabermetricians that you'll have more success hitting the ball in the air than hitting it on the ground.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is there's so many statistics now and so much analysis about if you hit the ball on the ground 80% of the time you're gonna make an out, and if you hit the ball in the air it's a less percentage of times that you're gonna make an out. And I think that unfortunately that hitters are patterning their swings now because of that. And not everybody can hit the ball out of the ballpark. And I think what I was taught was hit line drives. That's your ultimate goal, hit a line drive. And I just don't see that. And if you see the uppercut swings, they're not in the bat is not in the strike zone for very long. It's just a glance. It just cuts through the strike zone, and when they run into it, it goes a long way, but they don't run into it very often. And a funny thing I saw last week was Harold Reynolds interviewed Miguel Cabrera, who's one of the best hitters of all time and definitely one of the best hitters of the last 15 years. And he didn't even know what launch angle was. He asked Harold, "What's launch angle?"
Mm.
And Harold laughed and he said, he goes, "I try to take my hand to the ball. If the ball, how are you going to get on top of the ball if you're swinging up?" He goes, "The only time I would ever drop the barrel or create a launch angle is on a pitch down that I'm trying to lift." But here's one of the greatest hitters,
Right.
in the last 15
Hmm.
years. That he doesn't care about the launch angle. He learned how to hit it a certain way, and he's not going to change it because these sabermetricians are saying he shouldn't hit the ball on the ground. He's going to do whatever he learned to do as a kid, and it's been successful
Right.
for him.
And isn't that something? I mean, earlier when we were chatting, you asked a question. You said, "What happened to see the ball, hit the ball?" And can you imagine a young Miguel Cabrera coming up today and coming through the system today, and then someone changing the way he would hit so that he can work on his launch angle? Can you imagine that?
No, and we would have never seen what he's done in the last 15 years. I mean, as a kid, you start hitting a certain way and you tweak it as you grow up, and every year maybe you make improvements, but your swing is your swing. And you can make little changes, but to make wholesale changes, say, okay, now we want you to swing up instead of swinging level, just doesn't seem like it makes sense to me.
Right. And just so the listeners understand, I mean, you were a hitter. I mean, you hit 290 for your career. So it's not as if you're talking about something that you're unfamiliar with. I mean, you were a good hitter, 290 over a big league career. But going back to the analytics, what's your general view on it? I mean, we touched on some things, the launch angle. We hear about exit velocity. Certain statistics that I grew up with when I was flipping baseball cards back when kids used to flip baseball cards seem to not have as much importance to a certain segment of the baseball community, the analysts, RBIs for hitters, wins for pitchers, and things like that. What's your general view on sabermetrics and how it has affected and continues to affect the game today?
Yeah, I'm not a fan, Jeff. I've got to be honest. I mean, I collected baseball cards as a kid, and I've got thousands of them saved. But when I looked at a hitter's baseball card, I looked at his batting average, his home runs, and his RBIs, maybe his stolen bases. Okay, when I looked at a pitcher, I looked at his wins and losses, or his saves if he was the closer, and his earned run average. To me, those were the stats that mattered. And in our generation, those were the stats that mattered. And to me, the most important stat now is OPS because it combines your slugging percentage and your on base percentage. And to me, that's a telling fact because you see the guys every year who have the best years and they have the highest OPS. As far as the WAR, I don't buy into the WAR. I do buy into still the earned run average, the wins and losses, batting average, runs scored, things like that. But I'm not a big fan of all this, and I don't know that that it's necessarily changed the game to where we devalue those things. But I do hear on the MLB Network quite often, that wins don't matter for pitchers anymore, and these things don't matter. And I'm like, well, how come they've mattered for 100 years, and now in the last 10 years they stopped mattering? It doesn't make sense to me.
No. And as long as winning is still the point of the competition, I mean, you need pitchers who can go out there and who are gamers, right? I mean, when you had a game and it's late in the season and maybe a playoff position is on the line, you wanted a guy who was taking the hill that day who you thought could get you a W.
Yep. And his goal was to get that W. It wasn't to go 6 innings.
Right.
He was going to stay in that game. I mean, you just look back at some of the greatest pitchers back then. Nolan Ryan and Bob Gibson and these guys. And these guys were having 20 complete games in a year.
Right.
There's guys that have pitched in the last 10 years and they'll have 20 complete games in their career because they've completely changed. I think a lot of it has to do with the injuries. And, I saw a stat the other day where Nolan Ryan pitched a game, like 14-inning game. He had 19 strikeouts and he threw 240 pitches.
Wow.
I mean, that would never happen today. And Nolan Ryan
No.
was very rarely hurt in his 27-year career. So you can't say that that's not something that can be done today. It's just we've conditioned these guys to, all right, we're going to max out at 110 pitches. It doesn't matter if you've got a no-hitter or, you're the best guy we've got to get this guy out to win the game. We're taking you out to protect your arm. And I think we saw that, unfortunately, what happened with the Nationals with Steven Strasburg.
Right.
Where they were in a great position, to head into the playoffs, and they shut down their best pitcher. And to me, that's the reason they haven't been what they should have been in the past since that happened. To me, that's like baseball gods are saying, okay, you want to mess with the fabric of our game and the way it's been played? We're going to show you what the end result is. And they haven't been what everybody has expected them to be since then.
That's right. And a couple of years after that, the Mets went through a similar situation with Matt Harvey. And there's a little bit of controversy about that. What are they going to do? And they actually allowed Harvey to pitch in the postseason, and he ended up pitching fairly well. So it's interesting. It's an interesting look for the game. Now, on this point, what are your thoughts on something we have seen this year coming out of Tampa? And I think there might have been one or two other teams that have done the same thing, where they started the game with a relief pitcher.
Yeah, I think we're trying to reinvent the wheel. I know it seems like it a couple times it worked. I will tell you, in spring training, especially in spring training, when pitchers aren't going extended periods of time, everybody's trying to get into shape for the season, where sometimes you face a different pitcher every at bat in a game. And if you get 3 at bats, it's a different pitcher. It's tough. It's tough because you can't get used to a guy, and you've seen him a couple times and you're comfortable. Now you know what he's got. So that does make it tough. But the way I look at it is, you use 6 relievers in the game. Okay, what are the odds that all 6 are going to have a good day that day? All it takes is one of them to have a bad day, and we're going to lose the game no matter what. And so we're just going to run them out there, and you know, each guy's going to throw an inning or two or whatever, and let's just hope that every single guy has a good day that day and won't have a chance to win. When you got 5 starters, you know, most teams have probably 3 quality starters unless they're the Houston Astros, then you know what you're going to get that day. You're going to get 5 to 7 innings, maybe more of these guys, and you know what you're going to get every 5th day. And I think the whole reliever thing is just kind of something that's, you know, it's just like they're trying to trick us a little bit, and I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it.
Right, right. Now, Jeff, you are in the broadcast booth, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in a few minutes for the Texas Rangers. And you were drafted by the Rangers, right? Back in what, what
88.
year? 88, back in 1988. So it must be pretty cool to be in the broadcast booth now for the team that originally drafted you. But you were telling me a very interesting story about how it came to be and all the circumstances surrounding you being drafted back in 1988. And I just think it was a fascinating and a funny story. So just want to ask you, can you share that with the audience, how it came to be that you were drafted by the Rangers back in 1988?
Yeah, sure. I just finished my senior season at Southeastern Oklahoma State in Durant, Oklahoma, NAIA school. We had a great year. Our season was over. I thought my career was over. We didn't really have many scouts coming to our games back in those days. So I figured I was done, and I had a teammate who was a really good player who pretty much knew he was going to get drafted. He was a junior. I had been All-American a couple times, named Benny Colvert, and he was pretty sure he was going to get drafted by the Reds. Well, he got an invitation to a Rangers tryout, and he wasn't going to go. So I said, well, let me have your tryout. Let me have your invitation. So I didn't know if I could even do that. And my college coach called Doug Gassaway, who's, bless his heart, he passed away this past year, but he was one of the best scouts, signed one more, I think, big leaguers than any other scout. So he called Doug Gassaway and said, hey, Benny Culver's not going to come to this tryout, but Jeff Frye is going to come, if that's okay, and that he's not a guy who's probably going to stand out in a tryout, but, you have to see him play over a prolonged period of time to appreciate him. So I show up at Midwest City, Oklahoma High School. There's probably 60 guys there. We go take ground balls. A typical tryout, everybody runs a 60-yard dash. I don't even know what I ran. We take ground balls, and then you get in the cage to hit. So I get in the cage. We're using aluminum bats, and I'm facing the guy that I faced in junior college. So you just get in there. He's just throwing fastballs, he's trying to light up the radar gun. And I had a great first round. I was hitting line drives everywhere. Next round, I come out of the cage, and I could tell they liked what I did the first round. And so they said, all right, next round, we want you to get in there with a wooden bat, which I'd never hit with a wooden bat except as a kid. Maybe I remember having a Willie Mays bat that I got from the Giants game as a giveaway on bat day. And so, I played with my cousin with a tennis ball or wiffle ball, and use my Willie Mays bat. That's really the only time I'd ever used a wooden bat, which is a lot different than nowadays when kids are all using wooden bats at a younger age. So I get in there, and before I even get in the cage, they're like, all right, we want you to change your hands like this, and we want you to hold the bat here. These people had never seen me play. And now they're already making, after one round, which was a good round, they're changing me. So now I get in there. Now I'm facing another guy I've never faced before, trying to do what they told me to do. And I hold my hands, so at first pitch I take a pitch. Next pitch I swing at, I hit a home run. Not just over the fence, but it hit the back fence of the parking lot.
Wow.
And I'm not a home run hitter. I mean, I hit 9 home runs in my senior year in college with aluminum bats that were, the older aluminum bats, the Black Magics and the Easons. They didn't have the BB core, the limitations like they do nowadays. So that it was a big help. It was a lot different than wood. And so I hit this guy all over the place with a wooden bat. Next, they call me out, and they say, all right, we got one more guy we want you to face. They bring in this guy named Mike Converse, who just got released out of the minor leagues for the Reds. He's like 6'10". He gets in there, and I hit a home run off him too. So I hit 3 home runs, and it was like unbelievable. So I come out of the cage, and all these other guys that are there trying out are like coming up to me, patting me on the back. I'm like, that doesn't happen either at a tryout camp. It's like I put on such a show that even the other guys trying out were congratulating me.
Wow.
So now the scouts come up to me and said, hey, we want you to go to another tryout we have in Arlington Stadium, like in 2 weeks. I said, okay. So a week before the tryout, Southeastern is right there by Lake Texoma. So I go out on Lake Texoma. We're water skiing behind Dennis Rodman's boat. Rodman wasn't there, but the Rich family that, if you know anything about Dennis Rodman, the Rich family are the family he lived with when he went to Southeastern. So they were out there. I was friends with them, and we were out having fun on the lake. And all of a sudden, I go to get up on a ski, and the rope snaps out of my hand. My hand hits the end of the ski. I didn't think much of it. I looked down and my hand's bleeding. So I get out of the water and I look, and the tip of my ring finger on my left hand, on my ring finger, is just wide open, pouring blood. And then my middle finger is bleeding too. So I go right to the emergency room. They have to put 5 stitches through my fingernail and the tip of my finger on my ring finger. And I told the doctor, I said, well, I have a tryout camp in a week. And he goes, well, you're not going to be able to go to that. I was like, okay. So he walked out of his office. I pilfered through his drawer, got some rubber gloves. I'm confessing to stealing right now, but I took a couple rubber gloves and some gauze pads and put them in my pocket. I said, okay, thanks a lot. So now I've got to get my hand ready, So now I go, I show up at the tryout camp. Before the tryout camp, I wrapped my finger as tight as I could with gauze. I put a rubber glove over my hand and then my batting glove. So I try and hide it because I didn't want to tell them I hurt my hand. Right. So we go do the typical tryout stuff. You run. I take ground balls, and the guy hitting me ground balls was Oscar Acosta. He was a coach of mine in the minor leagues. After this, he's hitting rockets to me, and it's killing me every time I catch a ball. And I'm just grimacing, but I don't say anything. Now I go to get in the cage to hit, and the first swing, the bat flies out of my hand. I pick it up like nothing, and I hit, and they can tell I'm swinging gingerly, and they call me out, and I say, what's wrong? And I pull my glove off and my rubber glove off and my gauze pads, and I show them my finger that I had the stitches through my fingernail and the tip of my finger. And they asked what had happened. I explained what happened, and they said, well, obviously you want to play pretty bad. They said, why don't you go home and get your hand ready? We're going to draft you. I still didn't believe it was going to happen. So I go back to school, and, it's summertime. I'm staying up there, and all of a sudden on draft day, it wasn't like it was today where, you watch it on TV or you watch it on the internet. We didn't have internet. And we didn't really have a TV in college either. So all of a sudden I get a knock on my door, and it's my college coach, Mike Matheny, and he says, Jeffrey, he goes, you got drafted by the Texas Rangers in the 30th round. I was so excited, and a couple of days later, Doug Gasaway didn't want to drive all the way from Dallas to Durant. It's about 100 miles, so he sent Jimmy Dreyer up there to sign me. So I signed my contract in Coach Matheny's office, and after I signed, Jimmy Dreyer goes, well, did they tell you about your signing bonus? And I was like, no. He goes, well, you get $2,000 for signing. I was like, sweet, let's go. And then I went off and started my minor league career.
And after that, you played another 10 years. You played 10 years in the big leagues. Let me ask you, whatever happened to your buddy who didn't go to the tryout?
He ended up getting drafted by the Reds. He made it to AAA. First year, he won the batting title in the Pioneer League, the same league I was in. But he made it to AAA and never made it to the big leagues.
And yet he was the one that I guess was ticketed for the big leagues coming out of college.
I mean, he's a stud, 6'2", 200 pounds, home run hitter, could really run, really throw. He just kind of had a long swing and never really, I mean, he still had a good minor league career, but he didn't get a shot at the big leagues.
Right. Which, for the casual fan, they may not appreciate just how hard it is to make it to the major leagues. If you just look at the numbers, if you look at the number of players who are drafted and then the number of players who make it to the big leagues, even if it's just for a cup of coffee, it's a very small percentage. It is very difficult to become a
And I think
major
it's
league player.
I think it's less than 5% of the guys that get drafted. And when I got drafted, I think there was 50 rounds or more. I know one time it was unlimited because Piazza was like a 63rd rounder, but I think when got drafted, it was around 50 rounds. So figure 30 teams, 50 rounds, it's 1,500 players drafted. Not all of them would sign, but most of them. And 5% of those guys even get a cup of coffee.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I'm pretty fortunate.
sure. Now, as I said earlier, for your career, you were a 290 hitter, but there was a time early in your career in the minor leagues where you were scuffling a little bit. And you tell the story of how a wiffle ball game or hitting wiffle balls actually helped turn you around and changed your swing and all those types of things. And I think that's one of the more fascinating stories that I've ever heard because like nowadays there's coaches, there's film and all these other types of things, but you didn't have any of that when you made just your changes. You said it was because of wiffle ball. What
Yeah.
happened there?
That was crazy. Yeah. Well, my first year rookie ball I hit all right. I hit 286, short season. And then the next year I went to Gastonia in low A ball and actually won the batting title that year. Hit 313, I believe it was. And then went to the Florida State League and hit 272. So I was hitting pretty good. But then I got to double A and it was a big jump. I mean, these guys were throwing hard, and I could hit the ball, but I just wasn't strong enough. I mean, I was 5'9", 165 pounds, and so I just wasn't strong enough because the defenses were getting better, the outfielders were faster, and balls that were hits in A ball were getting caught in Double A. So I was probably hitting about 220 after 2 months of the season, and hitting the same way I'd always hit. And it was like, man, this might be it. I think I might have reached, my max here. And so after a game one night, we're in Wichita, Kansas, and we're staying in a hotel that has the enclosed pool, like in the atrium area. And we're just goofing off playing, actually, I think it was a wiffle ball wiffle ball bat with like a ball of tape that we put together.
Hmm.
And so I'm imitating, and I grew up playing wiffle ball, imitating everybody. I mean, Willie McCovey and Cal Ripken and George Brett and Pete Rose. I mean, every at bat I was a different guy. So I learned to hit it a lot of different ways. And so playing this game, I'm imitating at the time Ruben Sierra, who was a star with the Rangers, and he had this huge
Mm-hmm.
leg kick. And I never even messed around with a leg kick. So I'm hitting like Ruben Sierra, and and it's very, very dimly lit area, and somehow I'm just smashing this ball. And my roommate Rick Rona, who'd played in the big leagues with the Cubs, says, "Why don't you hit like that in the game?" I was like, "I don't know, why not?" All right. So the next day we go to the field. It's a rainy day, so we don't get to take BP. I go into the game. I used to kind of have not a wide open stance, a wide stance, but kind of a crouch down, my hands in front. Now all of a sudden I'm standing up there like Steve Garvey. Remember Steve Garvey kind of had the
Yeah.
stiff stance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now as soon as the pitcher gets ready to throw, I raise my leg up probably 2 foot off the ground and put it down. I didn't even get to practice this. I went right into the game doing it. I went 1 for 4, but I did hit a home run foul, which I didn't have much power, so that was unusual for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just started hitting that way. I went from that point in the season to leading our team in like 9 or 10 offensive categories, hit over 300. Didn't make the Double A All-Star team, but one of the guys got injured who made it, so they called me to the All-Star game. I told my agent at the time, I said, "Hey, I got a camp set up at home for the All-Star break. I'm going to get paid $300, and I need to go get this money because I'm making $1,200 a month in Double A. He goes, no, you got to go to the All-Star game. So I was like, all right, because I almost didn't even go. I go to the
Mm.
All-Star game, 4 for 5, MVP of the All-Star game. Then I go to winter ball after that to Venezuela with my new leg kick. Go to Venezuela, hit 300, All-Star team, voted most popular player in Venezuela. Next year I go to big league camp, should have made the team in big league camp, but they had Julio Franco, so that's all I need to say. He was a star, right?
Right.
So I go to AAA. I played the first 89 games, played every game, hit over 300, and they called me to the big leagues in, I guess it was June of that year, June or July. I can't remember. Can't believe I can't remember the exact date, but get called up, finished, played the rest of the year in the big leagues, ended up playing just over 9 years in the big leagues with a leg kick.
That's amazing. And from goofing around in a hotel with a wiffle ball bat and a makeshift ball made out of tape and God knows what else.
Yeah, with no practice.
Right, right. You just incorporated it into the game, man. That's an amazing story. And then, like I said, you went on and in the big leagues, was a very good hitter. Um, I'd like to transition though into some of your current work as an agent. First of all, when did you become a baseball agent?
I became a baseball agent in 2003. I had some opportunities, to become a scout, and I'd been gone so many years, so I didn't really want to be gone that much from my kids and stuff. They were little, and I could have become a coach too, but I mean that's basically you're gone, if not, I mean probably more even than the players. Longer hours at the field, and I didn't want to go back to the minor leagues and start riding buses again and coaching. I'd been gone for 15 years, so I wanted to stay in the game and had an opportunity with a friend to become a sports agent. And I said, what the heck? So I'd try it. That way I could stay in the game. And I always wanted to be on the side of the player. And I didn't want to be on the side of the coaches where I felt like I would be betraying the players if I knew a player was going to get released after the day in spring training. I didn't want to have to be fake and go up to him and say, "Hey, good job today." I couldn't see myself doing that. So I decided to become an agent. And Darren, it's funny. My first client was Darren Oliver, who was my teammate, and at the time he was represented by Scott Boras. And he calls me one day. I'd just become an agent, and he says, "Hey, I need your help." I was like, "What's up?" He goes, "I need you to get me a job." I said, "Well, you're represented by Scott Boras, I can't do anything." He goes, "Well, stay on the line. I want you to hear me fire him." And I was like, "No." I said, "Just call me back." So he calls him back 5 minutes later, said, "I fired him. See what you can do." Well, I had played with the Rockies the year before, and I had a good friend who worked with the Rockies. So I called him, and he got me in touch with the Rockies, with Dan O'Dowd, who's a GM, who knew me as a player. And I said, "Hey, I became an agent now, and I'm representing Darren Oliver. I just want to see if you have any interest." And he goes, "Yeah, we do have interest in Darren." He said, "We didn't before when Scott Boras called us at the beginning of the off season." He said, "But we haven't heard from him since, and things have changed, so now we have interest." So we worked the deal. We got Darren spring training with the Rockies, and made the team. Had to sign a 30 or 45 day contract because they didn't want to guarantee him the whole year, which we were reluctant to do, but we were desperate. We really didn't have any other options, so we took it. And Darren ends up going to Colorado and learning a cutter from Bob Apodaca, the pitching coach, and it entirely changed his career around. And he played 9 years in the big leagues after that. After he basically thought, with 9 years in the big leagues, he went to winter ball to try and revive his career. That's how he was in a bad state in his career. He had some rough years in St. Louis, and revived his career. He learned the cutter. He went, I think, the last 5 years or 5 or 6 years in the big leagues, he had an ERA under 3 as a reliever, and I mean the rest is history.
Yeah, and did you represent him for the rest of his career from that point when you took him on?
Yes, I did. And actually, one year he decided he was going to shut it down, so he told me he was done. I said, all right. And then like the next year, he goes, hey, I want to try and come back. So I was like, well, I
Hmm.
don't know. You know, when you sit out a year, I mean, at that age, it's kind of hard to get back. But I was friends with Sandy Johnson of the Mets, and I called Sandy. I said, hey, and because Sandy had been with the Rangers as assistant GM when Darren came up through the system. And so he knew Darren. He knew what the quality of guy he was. And that was one of the things about Darren was, you know, he wasn't just good on the field. He was a great guy in the locker room and, you know, a mentor to young guys. So he goes, hey, let me give you a call back. So sitting at home and I'm not hearing anything. It's funny. So I was like bored out of my mind. So I was like, I'm going to go play golf. I'm not going to sit around all day and wait for Sandy to call me. So I'm on the third hole of the golf course and all of a sudden I get a call from Sandy Johnson. It's windy out. So I crawl in the bushes to try and block the wind, And I'm like, hey, Sandy, how's it going? He goes, hey, Frye Burger. He goes, let's get Darren Oliver over here. I was like, all right, let's do it. So we work out a deal for Darren to sign. I think he signed for $600,000 after sitting out the year before and goes to the Mets and almost ended up pitching in Game 7 of the NLCS. It was between him and Oliver Perez. He ended up going to Oliver Perez, but I mean, he had a great year and then pitched, I think, another 5 years after that.
That's so funny. I mean, deals being done. I don't know if you got the deal done in the bushes, but at least the conversation started in the bush.
Oh, it
That's
did. I mean,
funny.
I have another deal with Ryan Franklin. I get a call from Walt Jocketty, and I forget who else was on the call. It's like, hey, it's a conference call. It's a full room of Cardinals front office people, and I'm sitting there with my newborn child screaming and crying, trying to change his diaper. I said, hey, bear with me. I'm changing the diaper right now. Um, and they said, hey, no worries. And so we work out a deal for Ryan Franklin to become a Cardinal over the phone when I'm changing a diaper. But you never know where you're going to be when these deals happen, you know?
Yeah, I mean and it's interesting because I think for those who work on the business side of sports, whether it's an agent or a lawyer, you work for the union, you work for the commissioner's office or for a club, that's how it is. It's not 9 to 5, it's not Monday through Friday. It's whenever. And
20, 24/7. You got to be ready. And
that's
that's
right.
why I thought, I was like, I'm just going to be honest with these guys and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I mean, my life has to go on. I have to take care of the things I have to take care of. And I can do two things at once.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I've had plenty of those calls too. Hey, I'm washing the dishes. Hey, I'm outside, raking leaves,
hmm Yeah,
and as
wherever
long as
you're
you
at,
don't mind the noise, I'm good, right?
I,
And
I can get this deal done no matter where I'm at.
right. So, in the agent business, what are some of the things? I take it you like it. I mean, you've been doing it since 2003, so you must still enjoy it in some respects. So, what are some of the things that you most enjoy about being an agent? And on the flip side of the coin, what are some of the things that you least enjoy?
Yeah, the the enjoyment side is seeing a guy get drafted and representing him his whole career and seeing him make the big leagues and just the pure joy that they feel and their family. And I mean, it's almost like I made the big leagues, when one of my guys makes it. And it's on the other end, it's also pretty frustrating when, um, you see a guy with so much promise who, for whatever reason, doesn't pan out. And you never know what the reason is. Some guys have all the talent in the world and they just, I don't know if it's the lights are too bright or what, but they just don't seem to be able to make it at the highest level. And, that's the downside. I enjoy the interaction with the players. Um, I'll look every night before I go to bed at the computer and minorleaguebaseball.com and see how my guys did and see if maybe they need a pep talk or just, hey, great game, and send them messages. I don't think that's what all the agents do. I would look every night every player and see how they did. And then, if they're in an 0 for a couple days, I'd send them a note, hey, you're going to get 3 hits tomorrow. So hang in there. And that's not something that I had coming up.
Mm,
You know,
right.
so I think that's something that I did different. My agent one time called me and said, hey, you need to steal more bases. I'm like, what?
Hmm.
What are you talking about? You think it's that easy? I can't steal
Right.
first. If I'm
Just
not
go
on
ahead and
first,
do it.
I can't
Right.
steal
Just go
second.
do
Yeah, so I didn't like that. So you gotta balance that. I'm not gonna call and say, man, you haven't got any hit in 4 days. What's wrong? That's how you lose clients. So, I think it's just the relationship part. I've probably been to 6 or 7 weddings of our clients, and
it. Mhm.
just seeing them grow, and become men. And we tend to, Mike McCann, my partner, and I, we tend to not represent people that we don't want to be associated with. We
Mm.
want to represent good people. They have good values and are going to be good people when their career's over, because it doesn't last forever. And so those are the kind of guys that we go after, and we've been, pretty successful. It's a frustrating business, as you know. It's very cutthroat. I tell people a lot that, I might be too nice of a guy to be an agent,
Mm.
because I'm not going to pretend like I'm your friend, and then when you walk away, call your client and ask if he wants to have lunch. And that's
Right.
how the business is, and that's the part that I really don't like. The underhandedness, the backstabbing stuff is it's heartbreaking. When I lose a client, I've lost clients over the years. Everybody does, but that I was attached to. I lost a client last year that I was there for the birth of both of his children. I represented him in college, all his minor league career, made the big leagues, helped him get to play overseas, and get a phone call one night saying that he needs somebody who has more contacts overseas. And I was like, it broke my heart. I couldn't sleep for like 3 days.
Mhm.
I was
Yeah.
like, man, all these years, I've been to your house for cookouts. I've done all these things all for you. And then one phone call later and you're kicking me to the curb. So those are hard. Those are hard. Those are tough days when you feel like you've done everything you can for somebody and they just turn their back on you.
Sure. And I've had my share of conversations with agents. As you know, Jeff, I do a lot of work for agents, have a number of agents as clients. And, I've been that shoulder or that ear sometimes that the agent needs when that happens. When the
Mm-hmm.
player all of a sudden says, I'm going in a different direction, or sometimes, you don't even get the courtesy of that, which makes it even that much harder to take as the agent, right? Because you put so much into the player, and it's a relationship. And I think that's what you're describing when you say, hey, I've been there for kids, I've been there for weddings, I've seen, this young man grow from a teenager into a man, and for the relationship to end, it's tough. And I hear it and I empathize, so I know exactly what you mean. That's a tough part of the business.
It is. And that they've been promised something from somebody else, or somebody's actually come in and said, hey, I've heard this before, you've outgrown your agent. Now you're a bigger star, so now you need us. It's like these guys that didn't know who you were 10 years ago, and now all of a sudden you've graduated up to where now you're at their level. And it's like, what about the loyalty? I'm a loyal person, so it's hard for me to understand how someone cannot be loyal to somebody who's done everything they can for them.
Sure, sure. Um, let's talk a little bit about the challenge of the agent business. Right now, we have a lot of agencies that are corporations, really. I mean, they are large entities with a large number of agents representing many players out there in the marketplace. And you mentioned your partner Mike McCann, and it's the two of you. And there are other agents, some are agents who are solo agents. And I often wonder, how do you compete in an environment that has over the years grown a bit more corporate, where you have some of these large agencies out there that can provide a wide array of services because they have greater resources. And obviously, those become recruiting tools. And I'm using air quotes here, recruiting tools Um,
Hmm.
so, how do you compete in that kind of an environment?
It's tough. It's really tough, and I mean, we can't really compete with the great big companies that have 20 employees that are running around the country, and they can say, oh, well, we represent Mike Trout, or we represent Freddie Freeman, or we represent this guy Aaron Judge. It's kind of hard to compete against those guys. So we basically don't try to. We have our little niche, and to be honest, Jeff, most of our clients we get now are through referrals. Either clients that we have like the work we've done for them, and a player will come to them and say that they're not happy with their agent and say, why don't you talk to my guy? That's good. I mean, that to me, that's an endorsement on what we've done. But I can't go out and, recruit amateurs, 24/7, because I can't be at their games all the time. I have,
Hmm.
I have kids.
Right.
I'm not a 25-year-old that can spend 7 days a week at a ballpark, and
Hmm.
sometimes that's what people want. But the a lot of the guys we're getting nowadays are, a scout will say, hey, this guy needs an agent. You're the guy I recommended. Um, you know, it's tough to compete at that level. We try not to. We never want to be a great big giant company. We want to have our handful of guys that we represent, do a good job for those guys. And I think once you get too big, then the service you run out of time to service everybody, and so you end up losing clients that way. And we never wanted to do that.
Sure. Yeah. It's a tough business. The agent business is tough. And, my hat is off to you and to and all the agents out there, because it's a really tough business. And Jeff, I've spent a fair number of years teaching at the law school, St. John's Law School, and I run into so many young students and young graduates who believe they want to be an agent. And I don't try to discourage them, but I do try to give them the truth about what they should expect, because it's not Jerry Maguire, it's not Arliss, it's not, you know, there's a lot of things that go into this that no one really talks about, and you won't know about it till you get there. But I try to give them a heads up before they make that plunge.
Yeah, I do the same. I get calls from time to time about, oh, I have my nephew or whatever is looking to get into being a sports agent. So I'll talk to them and just kind of give them an idea of what it's like and how cutthroat it can be. And, it's, I don't always know where they can start out. For me, obviously it started out, as being a player and going into it without any real knowledge except the contract negotiations that I went through when I was a player with my agent. But a lot of the competition are lawyers. Not many are former players. And I know I went to the agent meetings a few years ago, and they named me and Scott Sanderson, and I believe Dave Stewart was an agent at the time. That they said we're the only three former players that own their own companies. So
Wow.
that was pretty cool.
Yeah. I never thought about that. I know that there are a few agents who are um, who are former players who are agents, but I didn't know it was only three who actually owned their own companies. So that's interesting. Um, hey, let's talk a little bit now about what you're doing these days. And I think on the broadcasting side, and I think you're having some fun with the work that you're doing on Fox Sports Southwest, where you do pregame and post-game work on the Rangers broadcast. Tell us, first of all, how are you enjoying the new gig?
Oh, I'm loving it. I'm loving it. It's something that I never envisioned myself doing, to be honest. But I think the more I watch, it seems like I've always got the MLB Network on TV, and I see my former teammates Billy Ripken and Dan Plesac on there, and I was like, man, I can do this. And I watch the Rangers, and I see Mark McLemore as my teammate, and Darren Oliver and Pudge Rodriguez, and so it's funny. It was last year I'd gone out to the Rangers game and down on the field with this young man who was brought down there. Um, he had just a doctor friend of mine made a prosthetic finger for him, and we wanted to bring him down there and get to meet some of the coaches and players and stuff. So while I was down there, I ran into John Blake, who's been a longtime PR man in baseball for the Rangers and Red Sox, and we were friends. And I ran into him and I said, "Hey, John," I said, "if you need anybody to fill in on the Rangers pre and post game show, I'd be interested." And he was shocked. He's like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not? I think I could do it." So it kind of, nothing happened for a month or two. And finally I sent him an email and I said, "Hey, whatever happened with that deal?" And he goes, "Oh, let me get you in touch with Fox Sports." So I go in for an interview with Fox Sports Southwest, and within 10 minutes they said, "Hey, we're interested. So if you're interested, let's do this." And so I've done 12 games so far this year. I'm doing a game tonight and a game tomorrow, and kind of learning the tricks of the trade. Still trying to figure out which camera to look at, but I've got some good stories. I've got some good stories, and
Right.
it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Now, did you audition or did you interview? What was what was your meeting like? Did they want to see if you had any skills, or how did that go?
It was literally 10 minutes, maybe 15 at the max. That I just went in and talked to these two guys, and that produced the show, and just kind of just told them my story a little bit, and that was it. That was literally it. I showed up.
Really?
I came one day before my first show and kind of stayed in on the set and watched how things went down. And the next day I did a show. They did probably a 20-second. They got me up there on the set and said, "All right, talk into the mic for about 30 seconds." They didn't tell me what to talk about either. I just started talking. And I said, "Okay, you'll be fine." And then I went right into my first show, and without any practice. And yeah, I think I've gotten better every show. And after like my fifth show, they called me in and said, "Hey, we just we think you're doing a good job." And probably after my eighth show, I get a call from the producer. Says, "I just watched the show." And he says, "That was really good." He goes, "Who have you been talking to?" I said, "I haven't been talking to anybody." I just talking baseball. And the first couple shows I was, probably over prepared. I'm like taking notes on all this stuff and trying to make sure I said the right, what they wanted me to say. And that wasn't me. And so after probably 5 shows, I stopped taking notes, and I was like, I'm just going to talk baseball. I'm going to watch the game. I know I'll watch the game like the night before I go on, so I know what happened the previous night, and we'll talk about that. And then I'll watch the game after the pregame show. I'll watch the game 3 hours and just remember things that happened during the game, and then we'll talk about it after. And that's it. But really without any practice.
I mean, Jeff, that's a remarkable story because it's like you got thrown into the fire. No prep, no broadcasting boot camp, because I've heard stories of former players and others who go through certain paces before they get on air. And you got on air, it seems to me, after just some brief observation and talking into the microphone for 30 seconds.
Yeah, I voluntarily threw myself into the fire. That's
Yeah.
what everybody's like, "Man, are you nervous?" Because it's live. There's no delay. There's nothing. I mean, it's live. And I was like, "No, I'm not nervous. I mean, I'm just up there. I've lived this game, my whole life. I've played baseball since I can remember. Since I was 8 years old, I started Little League. And then it was, off to high school, college, and minor leagues, and the big leagues. And then, I probably had a few months break before I became a sports agent. So it's been my whole life. And, I don't need to, I don't think I have many tics when I talk and say a whole lot of stuff, like a whole lot of or at least I didn't know, sometimes you don't know if you have those things until you watch yourself. But I critique my shows, which after talking to people that also do this, they say you don't need to do that because you'll be too critical of yourself. But I do like to watch just to see if there's things I can improve on, because, I'd like for this to lead into something. I'd like to be on the MLB network or ESPN someday. I was always when I played, I was always the clown on the team, the joker, the guy who always was goofing around. And I think that plays on, at least on the MLB network, because I see a lot of that as someone who knows the game,
Sure.
but also can make it seem funny. And, that's just kind of who I've been my whole life.
Right. Well, I hope people on the network and ESPN get a load of this podcast, because you heard Jeff say he would like to be on the network or ESPN. So we're putting it out there right now. So
Let's do it, fellas. Come on. Make it
that's
happen.
right. That's right. Let me ask you a couple of questions before we go, and it's about broadcasting. And for me, I watch baseball, and for all sports, I don't like homers. I don't like those announcers who are. I understand you're going to have some bias to the home team because they're paying you, so I get that. But too much of a homer for me is a turnoff, because sometimes the team is not good, or it's not playing well, or mistakes are being made. And so, how do you go about that? I know it's early, but have you thought about that somewhat of, hey, I want to be true to my employer, to the network, but also too, I have a responsibility to the fans that are watching.
Yeah, and I talked to them before I ever went on and said, hey, do I have to pretend like we're good if we're not, or vice versa? And they said, well, we'd like to give a positive spin, pregame show. Before every game, we have just as good a chance to win as the other team. So let's go out there and have a positive spin and talk about the good things that happened the night before. But once the game's over, and if we lost 12-0 and got 2 hits, it's kind of hard to put a positive spin on that. So I try not to be too critical of guys, but I will point out things where I think if a player made a mistake or should have done something in my mind that would have helped him be successful. But I also do remember, I think a lot of people forget, Jeff, is how hard the game is. And when I played, it wasn't that easy. And these are the best players in the world. There's 700. I tell this people all the time. There's 750 major leaguers in the world, and there's over 7 billion people. So
Yeah.
you're in a select group, and these guys are the best in the world, and they're competing against other guys who are the best in the world. And so it's, this game is easy from your couch. When you see it, you don't realize the speed of the game. And it's hard to notice that when you're watching on television. So I kind of keep that in mind. But I'm not afraid to say if a guy makes an error, he knows he made a mistake. That's part of the game. That's why they have the E on the scoreboard after the runs and the hits. It's because it's part of the game. It's
Right.
more the mental mistakes, or maybe, in-game situations where things happen that, could cost your team a game, some little fundamental mistake that I like to point out. But the players know when you make a mistake or when you do something good. So we just like to point that out.
Right. Right. And you're right. I mean, it's, in talking to former players and current players, I mean, the difficulty of the game cannot be overstated. So, but Jeff, I really enjoyed the conversation today because of all the things we touched on. The aspects of a player, and as an agent, and as a broadcaster, and I'm hoping that you continue to have success both in the agent business and in your current work in broadcasting, that you keep getting more and more opportunities to do that. But I do want to thank you for taking some time today, and you've been very good. I mean, it's on very short notice too, so I appreciate you coming on today and sharing some really fascinating things with us.
No, I appreciate you having me on, Jeff, and I appreciate working with you over the years. With arbitration cases, and hopefully our friendship can continue to grow.
Yeah, I sure hope so as well, Jeff. I always enjoy the time speaking with you, and certainly enjoyed it today. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, buddy.
I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation with Jeff Frye. His take on the game was enlightening and refreshing at the same time. Jeff is one of the good guys in the baseball business, man. I'm privileged to know him and to call him a friend. As we prepare to pack up, don't forget to tell your friends that there are great things going on at Sports 360. Make sure you subscribe so you can be right there with us as it all goes down. Scully is in the wings, and I don't want to keep him waiting, so it's time to bounce. See you next time. Sports 360.